This is the Team Objection Podcast for October 26th, 2021, coming to you live for episode 503. And I don't actually think there's going to be too much bad blood on this, but it just made sense with the whole bad theme. We're bringing up an episode that we talked about doing a few episodes back before 500 in that whole loaded show, which is essentially bringing up really good video games that missed their chance in some form. Either they got off to a rough start before they finally found themselves, or they cruised along and everything was a masterpiece and then they fell off a cliff at the end. And that's going to be kind of the topic of today's show.
I initially had the idea of playing one of the examples I'm going to bring up.
Oh no!
But first, I have a big announcement. I'm
Okay.
wearing two watches now. One is
That's
a
dumb.
Fitbit, and one is analog.
Why?
Because first of all, Dave, look at the fashion.
Yeah,
Look at
again,
it.
why?
And second of all, well, yeah, it's great because this watch does like my steps and stuff, and then this watch is for like for time, which this one also does, but this one looks classy when I need to look at the time.
But meanwhile, unless you're wearing long sleeves, you look stupid wearing two watches.
No, this looks cool. Look at when I do
No, it
this.
doesn't.
No watches. Up this way. No
well,
watches.
now between the three of us, we have three watches on.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? It's practical. It really is somewhat practical because, like, this watch syncs to my phone, so sometimes it can get thrown off or it dies. And then this one's just, like, old reliable, you know? You know what gave me gave me the inspiration? Watching Jay Crowder play poker. And those guys were wearing, like, 4 watches on one arm. And I was like, and they were all, I mean, each one was more expensive than anything I could ever come close to affording my entire lifetime. And they had 4 of them. But it looked super cool. I don't look as good as Jay Crowder, but I'm doing my best.
I don't know how you handle having something on your right wrist in general. Like, I've tried putting watches on my right hand. It hurts. Like, I can't fathom it. And maybe it's just because I'm not used to it. I can't do it.
That's weird. That sounds like a mental thing that you have that you're going to have to work through.
It's just because I'm not used to it.
I used to like wearing a watch on my left arm. In high school, I wore one for a couple of years because I got one as a nice gift. I can't do it anymore. I didn't like the tan line it left, especially down in Phoenix. When I was down there still, that was, cruise control for a huge, massive tan problem.
I don't tan, so it's perfect.
I do. If I could show you my arm next to my chest, it'd be quite a revelation.
I don't think I have too much of a tan line from this Apple Watch. It's not bad.
A little bit. Like, you can see it, but you wouldn't. It doesn't stick out. Like, you wouldn't notice
Yeah.
if you weren't looking at that area. This stuck out. If I ever took it off, like if I was swimming or something, you'd be like, ah.
You
It
naturally
better
have dark-
promotes the theory that I'm a vampire, which is established in my opening shot of the the intro, and is just gets furthered as we go on.
True.
It is interesting you actually show up on film.
Yeah, well, a mirror would be where it is,
It's
and
true.
I don't show up in the mirror. It's funny that you ask. I've been wondering about that for a long time.
Do we have a mirror handy? I want to test this theory.
Oh, we'll have tech guy go find one.
Okay.
Got it. Perfect. Who's tech guy now?
I have one other quick. I'm so sorry. If you understood how long I was waiting on this, you would be a little more understanding. I watched Casino Royale recently to get ready for the new James Bond movie. And Chris, I wanted to just tell you, I was so pleased to see that the scene where he gets the royal flush at the end, or it's straight flush. I think it's a straight flush. I always thought it was they make all their bets, they go all in, and then the final card is flipped. And I was like, because that would have been there's no skill in that at all. You just got purely lucky. All of the cards are flopped or whatever you call it. And then, so, I mean, it's still like a little ridiculous, but it's like saved the movie for me. It's so much better that way because he's just reading to Lashif.
I think what they had to do was they had to figure out a way that, I guess they could have made it so they were heads up. That would have been the smart play because somebody had to win all the chips. They still had 4 people left in that hand. So the only way to end it on that scene was to have all 4 of them go all in. And the only way to have all of them go all in was probably to have at least a pretty good hand. They probably went a little too far with multiple full houses in play and all that. And then a straight flush.
Yeah.
But I understand why. And like you said, it wasn't like there was a luck factor to it. When the money goes in, Bond has the best of it. It's a little bit silly that we have all in on the river. But,
yeah,
it's a movie.
And again, at least it was, if I was Bond and I had a straight flush, I probably would have bet everything too. Which is so much better than I'm really counting on this last card being the one that I need, and it hasn't flopped yet,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I thought for years. I had forgotten that that's not how the movie works. And so I saw it, and I was like, big relief. I can't wait to talk to the guys about it.
One of the best things about Rounders, too, I mean, granted, they're just reenacting Johnny Chan's famous hand from the World Series, but he flops the joint, and then he milks it to the river, and he gets Teddy KGB to put it all in then. So it wasn't like he got lucky there. Whereas he did get unlucky to lose all the money in the first place. So it's a really smart way for people who understand poker to be like, yeah, he was a good player, got unlucky in a massive way, and then used skill to exact revenge at the end.
That sounds cool, actually.
It's true. I do take umbrage with Teddy KGB's Tell, but that's a different story. Like, it's too obvious for that movie, but I know you had to pander to the non-poker fans, but whatever.
Right. And
I should
also,
probably watch that movie at some point. I watched the beginning and
You
I
would
was like,
like it.
I don't like it.
it's a slow start.
Yeah, and then now, which is perfect for what we're getting into today.
Mhm.
I should probably give it. It's brought up all the time, especially pay that man his money. And I know we reference it, but even when I'm on like message boards, like with DeAndre Ayton, you can't believe how many times I saw pay this
Pay
man his
that
money.
man his money.
Yeah.
Hey, him.
So that is the subject matter. We're making it full circle. Excellent segue. Before we jump in real quick, I'll just say I have lowered the latency to the lowest possible level. So when we see things in the chat, they'll be almost in real time.
Oh my god.
Probably is down to like a 5-second delay or so, which is about as little as you could expect. So Doug and Michaela, we see you. We'll take your thoughts on this as well. We're going to start with the games that have a bad beginning, but turn around. Yes, I saw that already. Turn around quickly. So, like, however long the bad beginning is, we'll get into for each of these examples. I'm going to go first. I put the pictures in for these, so I'm kind of forced into going first on these because it's going to be given away anyways. And I figured, why not go for the biggest possible, most controversial decision for what a bad beginning in a game is?
Oh,
I'm
glad
up,
you did this.
By putting up this one.
It was on my list.
For those who can't see, who are in the podcast form, it's Kingdom Hearts 2. And here's my problem. I find the beginning 5 hours to be thoroughly unpleasant to play. Thematically, what's going on is important. The mystery of what all this is and who the hell we're looking at and how it connects to Sora is interesting. And quite frankly, the only thing that gets me through the awful fucking gameplay in the entire section of this part of the game. It infuriates me every time. My willingness to go back and play Kingdom Hearts 2 is tempered by the fact that I do not want to go around finding 7 mysteries of no importance whatsoever just to get to the part where Sora's reconstructed.
So, I'm curious, did you play the games in between before playing Kingdom Hearts 2?
Yes, I played Chain of Memories, so I at least had
Chain
some
of Memories
idea.
was the only one
Yeah.
Okay,
at this point.
Yeah, so I played that, so at least I had kind of an idea about the ending of that and what it might mean for this, and so it wasn't completely out of the blue, but still.
So for me, I played Kingdom Hearts 1 at your request, Chris, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And then I saw Kingdom Hearts 2 come out, and I'm like, all right, let's jump in, let's do this. And I started Kingdom Hearts 2, and I was like, what is going on? Who is this person? Where's Sora? Why do they all have an X in their name? I'm really, nothing, no explanation. I was so lost, and it got to the point where it was an enjoyable game later on down the road, but it was just one of those, so disjointed, so jarring that I had no idea what was going on, and it took away from the experience.
Well, let me tell you, even if you had played Chain of Memories, you really wouldn't have known, other than the most basic thing. I believe at the end of Chain of Memories, he goes into the bubble. But everything about who is this other guy, that's not introduced at all.
Yep.
Organization is introduced a little bit, but you'd almost be more confused if you played it, because this organization is the real organization, not the Splinter Cell that broke off from the main organization, which was the enemies in Chain of Memories. It's almost more confusing if you did play Chain. It's almost easier to just say, okay, Sora's in a pod. And that's all I need to know, and that's fine.
And this is the most simple of the in-between explanations we would have to give. It just gets worse and worse down the road. Chain of Memories is almost basic compared to that.
Yeah. So I was getting ready to be like, there's not enough shades available to me to tell you how wrong you both are. But I will say, when I was doing some research for this, I want to be authentic, but I like looking into it, so I make sure I play a lot of games, so I want to make sure there's nothing I missed. This game definitely came up as a good example of a bad beginning. So I get it. I understand it. I have to say I loved it. I found it absolutely riveting. I loved the static imagery as they're reconstructing him, the mystery of it all. trying to figure out what was going on, learning about this new character in this new world, but there were like glitches. Like, I live for that shit of like the Truman Show-esque, like, what's going on here? Yeah, I mean, the skateboarding thing, is it the best gameplay I've ever done? Like, no, it's certainly not.
How about having to do it many times to get enough points to advance? Doing it once would be bad enough, but doing it 4 or 5 times?
It was okay. I was fine with it, which I guess is like the difference. Like, I was fine with okay gameplay to get the story. I was willing to accept that it wasn't like this super riveting. It's certainly not what you're expecting. If you play Kingdom Hearts 1, you're like, okay, when am I going to get to start like killing things with a Keyblade? And that's fair, but I just loved it. And it would be interesting. Would I love it if my first experience was today, when my time to play games is a lot less and I, in a lot of cases, want to get to the meat of it sooner? Maybe not. So it might just have to hit you at the right time in your life. In this case, I played Kingdom Hearts 2, found out there was a secret ending, and then replayed it immediately upon beating it. So this was a much different time in my life.
I think expectations play into that too, because like you said, if you played Kingdom Hearts 1 and you get really excited for Kingdom Hearts 2 and you're like, hey, I want the Disneylands, I want Donald, I want Goofy, you hear about Mickey's and more in this game, like you're excited for that, and you have 5 hours of a random group of people that you know nothing about.
Yeah, and it's a weird example because I could almost make an argument now, even though it is not exciting gameplay, I'd almost rather go through it again because I know Roxas now, and I love Roxas, and so getting that side of the story would be fun, even though you would think, oh, the skateboarding again for the 50th time. I like it a lot. Doug, I have to disagree with you, though. You got to love it for Vivi. I actually hated it because he was touted as like, look at Final Fantasy VI finally getting to be in Kingdom Hearts. And then that's what they did with Vivi. He's in it for 2 seconds. And Final Fantasy IX, that's what I meant. Like, it's this big deal. The creator's like, I can never do 9. And then he did. And it's like, he might as well not have.
Yeah, certain Final Fantasy characters certainly got better treatment than others over the course of the Kingdom Hearts games. Let's just put it that way. It was cool that Vivi made the cut, and it wasn't like he was bad, but it was sort of like, yeah, he's really only in this, and he's completely inconsequential. Yeah. All right, cool, I guess. Thanks. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the worst thing about the Kingdom Hearts series is the minigames. So a stretch at the start of a game, here's the way I look at it. Imagine if they did this with the gap between 2 and 3. And you start 3, and they pull this bait and switch after like 14 years. Imagine the rage then. Because at least 1 and 2 were relatively close together and only had the one game in between. But look, I love the story parts of it. If you'd eliminate the gameplay and just give me like 2 hours of him slowly figuring things out, and occasionally there's a couple fights in there, I would be just fine. The minigames are completely worthless, and they're a fucking waste of time. That's all.
You know what, though? I teared up. And so I have to say, it did something,
Yeah, emotionally it resonates.
Yeah.
And maybe the idea is supposed to be, look, he's having this idyllic time with his friends. And it's like, okay, but I'm not having a fun time, even though Roxas is supposedly having a fun time.
But they can never make it to the fucking beach.
No, they can't make it to the beach.
They just can't. No matter what. The money gets stolen. I was so frustrated. I was like, I feel for you, Roxas.
All right, well, there's my pick. I can go one more full blast if you want, or you guys can throw your first one out there.
You know, if you have a full blast one, the one that's potentially controversial, I'll go just because this was the game that I played.
Okay, I'll save mine for last.
Okay, and I thought it was interesting, and we're not going to have a lot of back and forth. I just wanted it as an illustrative purpose. I played Bayonetta 2. That's what the game is. So I played Bayonetta 1, and it was like good. And the combat was really good. I loved a game where the system is all based around parrying, which I'll never pronounce right. Parrying. Parry. Okay, parrying. Mm-hmm. Really fun. And Dave, every time you parry at the right time, like time slows down and it allows you counterattacks. It's really fun.
Yep.
And so you get over like a lot of the kind of like sexualization because it's there, but it's also like kind of empowering, and she's like a witch, and she's like girl power, so it's cool. And then the second one starts, and it was maybe the worst game for about 15 minutes that I've ever played in my life. That like the story, eventually they get to a spot where they're telling an interesting story with like gods, and there's some Norse mythology in there, but it's people like they dial the language, the violence, and the sexualization up to like 15 right from the get-go. You don't know what's happening. There's jets flying through the city. You're on the jet and you're fighting, and I'm just like, what is happening? This is so thoroughly unenjoyable. And then even the little bit of fighting you're doing, it's like really set piece focused, so you're not even getting the good part of that. And I wanted to just quit.
The word I would use to describe the opening of Bayo 2, which I've watched someone play both games, I've not played them myself, is self-indulgent. Because it was like, hey, people liked certain things about the first game. Let's just throw it at them at the start of the second game. It's like, you don't really need to do that. If they liked the first game, they're already here. If they didn't, this is going to be way too much, way too quickly.
And they have an Italian caricature character who's just like, forget about it. Oh, fuck. Oh, fucking fuck. It's like, stop. Like, I know what you're doing, and it's not working because it seems so fake.
I'm just glad I know who Bayonetta is thanks to Smash Brothers. So,
yeah, that is something to be said for Smash in general, is the crossover actually brought in some characters other people may not even know about.
Never heard of her. I remember unlocking it. I'm like, who?
It was interesting to me, though, because you have a game where tonally the beginning is not indicative of almost anything that comes later. It's like, I would never say it's grounded, but it's interesting. There's some actual like pathos and narrative beats that are interesting. And it's a little more dialed down. And so why you would start a game with just like dialing it so high is like, I was really confused by. That's all. That's my example.
I have an example of, I guess my bigger example probably is Twilight Princess. And
that's my second example, so we can both talk on this one, Dave.
Interesting. It was one I thought about but didn't put on my list.
Yeah.
And it was one of those because it was the first game, obviously, for the Wii that I was excited for. I'm like, man, look at all these cool things the Wii can do. And then I come out and I'm a wolf for 10 hours. And it's just like, I know I'm exaggerating, but like, can I stop being a wolf already? Can I get a sword? Can I please do what Zelda, like I do as Link, instead of having to run around in this weird wolf form? And it's been a long time since I played it. I don't think I played it again. I played it just once. And it's just one of those things I just remember being so frustrated. Like, can I stop being on four legs, please?
Yeah, well, so really quick, Soma, if I'm reading that right, really quick had I thought a great comment. It sounds like the opening had no context. And that was another issue too. If you want to do a sequence in Bayonetta with jets and all this like crazy stuff, but it's like you're building up to it, that's fine. Starting a game where I don't even know what's happening, I have no time to get my bearings, and you're throwing it all at the wall, it was too much. Dave, I would even go a step further on Twilight Princess and say I found it like the reason I can never go back, I think, again, is even before you become a wolf. Just like all the stuff on the farm, it's like so slow, and the drabness and the atmosphere, I think, in some ways works for it down the road. But when you're starting the game, it's just everything looks boring. Everything sounds boring. It's just so monotonous. And that's even before you get to the wolf, which you have a good point. It's find all the bugs and you're just stuck forever. And yeah, it's a lot.
And it's one of those things that I remember the time being like, everyone was being, look how realistic this Zelda looks. It's so cool. And I'm over here in the camp of like, I'm sorry, Wind Waker was the best looking Zelda I've ever seen. And you're going to tell me that this is the coolest looking thing and I'm going to run around a farm? Like, it just didn't hit right. And to be honest, Wind Waker wasn't that great of a beginning for me either. The sneaking around the castle wasn't that great either. But I'm not going to say that was a bad beginning necessarily.
It's at least interesting, and you're at least playing as the type of character you expect to when you sign up for a Legend of Zelda game, because you're not playing Okami. You're playing a Zelda game. I think it's frustrating because I think the idea was, again, like, conceptually, I get it. Show the idyllic farm life of this random guy who's going to get sucked into this world-altering scenario. But idyllic is usually not fun. And this was not fun. I didn't have a fun time catching the goat the 75th time it stormed out, and I had to catch it and then turn it aside with the motion controls. Wasn't having a good time with that because I made the mistake of playing it on the Wii. I should have played it on the GameCube. That's on me.
Yep.
I did that.
Did the Wii too.
But it's the same problem where, again, there's some interesting things going on, and the mystery with the wolf and the whole Twilight side of things and the graphical effects that applied in the Twilight world. Those were all kind of cool, and then you make your way to the castle and the whole Zelda thing and the shroud. Like, there's a lot of good things going on, but it just feels like it could have been cut in half and not lost anything for it.
Yeah, and Dave, like Wind Waker, you have all the stuff on the island, and that's pretty fun, and the bird and all that. I mean, and I would say Skyward Sword, is that the most exciting of beginnings? Like, no, but at least I felt like it was, you're spending time with the characters, and it's a new like world. Like, why are they in the clouds? Like, so something was interesting. This was like as almost like their purpose was to make it as ho-hum as possible to then, I guess, in their minds, subvert it with all the Twilight stuff. But it just makes for a really boring beginning in that case.
Well, I mean, I like when you have a world building thing and something gets shattered. I mean, that it makes sense to have a start to it where it's like, hey, look at this look at this world that we're going to establish. So Skyward Sword established, hey, we're up in this sky world type of thing. But, and like Chris said, though, you can cut it in half. Like, you don't need to stretch it out that long.
Honestly, Skyward Sword's beginning gets a pass for me just because I love Link and Zelda's interactions in the first part of the game.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of silliness and fluff there, too. I mean, while everybody loves Groose, he's kind of just a needless pain in the ass in the beginning of the game, you know, like, but at least I understand why all that's put together, and it doesn't actually take that long if you're not terrible at gameplay. Horan Soma makes an interesting point in chat too, which is something that Dave and I don't know, I didn't know you back then, Sean, so maybe you were too. Wind Waker was not well received for its look way back in the day. Everybody hated that shit as a consensus. There were certainly supporters. Dave and I were kind of on board with it at the time, so we get at least partial credit. But back then, the consensus was, yeah, we don't like this. We wanted that realistic tech demo we saw a couple years before Wind Waker's release, which ended up looking more like Twilight Princess. And now, 20 years later, all of a sudden we go, oh, yeah, that actually didn't fit as well as we thought.
I remember it being such a big deal how much Wind Waker got shit on for the graphics. And even, when we bought them, Chris and I got the game at the exact same time, played through it at the same time. I loved them. I thought it was fantastic.
Look, and I would say I was disappointed at, you see the tech demo, and then you see we're instead going in this cartoonish direction, and I was like, oh, that's a bummer. And then I read all the reviews and people saying this is going to age really well. It actually looks fantastic, and I was on board. But I can also understand the initial shell shock of it.
The big thing at the time was a haughty, sarcastic Zelda, more like Zelda, am I right?
Zelda.
That was the hit line.
Yep.
Zelda.
Yes, it was.
Yep. So, I mean, we don't always know things. And again, I've been wrong about plenty of shit, but that was one where we look back and I go, even just the world itself was vibrant and colorful. So if what I wasn't doing wasn't that interesting, the world in which it was happening was. Twilight Princess looked drab and was drab. And that's really a tough combination.
Yeah, and Doug, all the Zelda openings showing courage. Of course, I just wanted to be... I'm sorry, his comment was, show any boy with courage
Take it out of context.
can become a hero. It's like, well, yeah, sure, that's great, but make it exciting still. I don't want to be bored through it. And then Mikhail brings up a good point. I had the same thought. Ocarina of Time gets off. I mean, you're in a dungeon in, 30 minutes at most.
And before that, you're finding a sword and shield and stuff, so you're still doing things that are relevant to doing a dungeon. So you get, this is one of those times where, we almost always will say, show, don't tell. If it's going to be boring, tell, don't show. I don't need to do household chores and, things around the farm. I don't need to do that. If I want to do that, I'll play Stardew Valley.
And I feel like Breath of the Wild was one of those that hit the ground running too, where it's like, hey, you just woke up and you have no idea who you are or where you are. So
go play with physics.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool.
And now go out in the world. One of the biggest strengths of that game is just the opening, where you're even restricted to that opening area while you still figure out what's going on. It doesn't matter. You still feel like I'm solving a mystery. I don't even know where to go. The map looks huge. Let's do this.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, even that opening area is huge a huge feeling. When you actually run across it, you're like, this is pretty big.
Yeah.
Well, to make the Ocarina of Time comparison again, think about the Lost Woods and the Kokiri Forest and how little that is. Sure, gameplay expanded since then. Fine, great. But compare that to the start of Breath of the Wild, and it's just night and day.
I think since Dave took mine, and so I don't have one, which is I think is going to work out for our time anyways. I just think it's interesting that most of the time in media, whether it's books, movies, games, they would tell you start the story where you need to start it, not where it necessarily starts, but where the best point to start it is. And I always think it's interesting when some intro is really, really boring. I would say even as much as I love it, the Lord of the Rings, I have a little, especially in the book, it's like they're doing this party for Bilbo for ever, and it's like, oh my god, can we get to the actual ring stuff? I don't care. This Bilbo's turning whatever. I don't know what age because they talk in some weird Hobbit language. Just get to the interesting stuff. And I definitely felt that with Twilight Princess. Just start where it's interesting. It doesn't need to be exciting. Like we said, Skyward Sword, just those interactions are compelling. We've never really had that before between Link and Zelda. Do something that is interesting on some level.
And if you can't, start in media res.
Yeah, start somewhere else. Exactly.
Which is, I think, what saves Persona 5 from being on this list. Because I'm intrigued by what's happening in that very beginning of the game enough to be like, because the beginning is a little slow. I have no problem with it. I can understand why someone would say it is, but because you start in the middle of this weird caper, I think that's enough to carry you through a bit of a slow start.
Sure. Okay.
Because you're like, oh, I'm in school, I'm being yelled at by Sojiro, and I can't choose my activities in the beginning. I keep being told to go to bed by an invisible force and then a cat. It's just. It's a whole thing. So anyways, the point is, like, they started in the middle because I think they realized if we start this just with him showing up at this coffee place, it might be too slow.
I can talk forever about how good Persona 5 is from beginning to end, but we should get to your...
That'll be a future one.
To your next one, yeah.
We have for 5 episodes at least already.
Yeah, Doug, he wasn't turning 129. He was turning like 11D to 9th or something really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give me that 129.
I have a couple I want to list rapid fire before I get to my big one, just to put them in this section. Final Fantasy 13.
Well, I mean, the whole game sucks.
I think it gets better once it's not linear.
It does.
But that means the start of the game is effectively like 15 hours, so that's a tough sell. It doesn't really fit, which is why I don't have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
More than a start, sir.
Yeah.
I would put Arkham Asylum in this list. And I think Arkham Asylum is the best of the Batman games. I don't think either of the other two games in the trilogy quite recaptured the same magic. But the very beginning, when you're basically like being led through the hallways of Arkham and nothing's really happening for the first hour and a half, is a little tough for me.
I love it. See, I wanna jump on you and fight, but I know you're leading towards the real fight.
Mm-hmm. There'll be a real fight. I also think the ending of Arkham Asylum sucks. So it's really, I hold the middle part of the game in such high regard, like the middle 80% of it, because I don't like the Joker fight at the end at all either. So
I have an example like that too.
That was on the list of, yeah. Okay.
And then Persona 4 has a lot of the same problems of Persona 5. Yes, there's murders happening, which is interesting, but it takes you a long time to figure out what you're actually supposed to do about them.
I don't know if it was writing. I actually had this thought, Chris. So Persona 5, I love it. Like, I'm there for that beginning. I've extolled the beginning many times. Persona 4 is similar in a lot of ways, and I find it an absolute drudge. And like one of the reasons I don't want to go back and play it again. And like, was the difference just they did a better job of encapsulating the world and the characters? Was it better writing? Was it just that in medias res, the intro? Like, I don't know, but they should be similar, but they're not.
Yeah. And then the last one I'm going to put on my list, and remember, everything that we've put in this, we are saying are great games, so it's not like this is a massive criticism of any of them. I don't think Final Fantasy VI's beginning is very good.
Oh, I love it.
Keep in mind, that's the game that I put highest of anybody on our panel when we did the best games ever. I think it was number 2 or number 3 for me. But when I think back to that game, I think everything before the opera is almost a waste of time.
Oh my God, you're cutting me. You wound me.
I don't need to be having Moogles help me through a dungeon with the main villain looking like an absolute joke, because I don't know that he's supposed to look like an absolute joke yet. It's my first introduction to him. And I don't really need any time on a raft with a fucking giant bearded old man who can die at a moment's notice. And I'm not really hugely a fan of having to beat the shit out of guards and steal their clothing, although the end moment where he gets to sell us is certainly worthwhile for Locke's journey. So all of it I just kind of find to be like, eh?
Yeah, but okay, so fundamentally, like, here's an interesting thing. I love when the main group has to split and you each is doing their own thing. You typically don't like when the main group has to split. So right from the word go, it's like...
I don't like it in the beginning.
Yeah.
I like it towards the end of games when you have a big enough party to support that, so you don't feel like, oh, I have like one dude with each party. But it's almost too early in that game because we don't know enough about any of these characters.
Doug's absolutely right. You should have introed this with, I have a hot take.
I know.
Certainly a hot take.
I knew when I put it on the list it was going to be controversial. I didn't even want to put it as the picture because it was too big of a reveal.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I agree with the fact of, like, they throw characters at you so quickly in that game, like you don't feel like you know them well enough to do the split. But I will say that intro scene when you're Terra coming through with the magic armor, just like beating the shit out of people, you're like, whoa, what is going on right now? I'm intrigued. So it sucks you in quickly.
I love all of it. I 6 is one of those old games that I would go back and gladly play again because I love every part of it. There's no section where I'm like, oh, I have to go through. Maybe later in the game there's something, but
that haunted town always bothers me.
I think I have the same thing. I think, yeah, like late, like the World of Ruin, right? It's like one of the first things you do in the World of Ruin.
Yeah, it's like Zozo, I think is the name. Something like that.
I thought of like, I don't know why. I didn't like that part a lot either, but man, I love that. Everything about the beginning and like Locke and going through the tunnels, and I love Moogles. Maybe that's why. This was before Moogles were destroyed for me. When they started making them voice act Koopo instead of like the brr, brr, which...
Yep. Cardinal sin.
Who did that? Who was responsible for that?
Final Fantasy 9?
No, 9 didn't do it. I mean, it was in the text box, but it's still implied in my head. They're like, brr. I want to say it's 13 too. We had this actress. I think she's in the whatever show. I'm not going to think of the name of it now, but she doesn't. She's like, oh, that's really interesting, Koopo. This is the worst thing I've ever heard.
Let's save Koopo.
Certainly 13-2.
Yeah.
At least I never finished 13. I couldn't bring myself to do it, but never came up in the part of it I did, which was a pretty hefty chunk.
Yeah.
But I remember you playing 13-2 and hearing that from the other room in the house we were in at the time and being like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, Soma said Zozo sucks. So I think there's like a collective unconscious of everyone hates Zozo.
It's supposed to be like a weird, quirky town, and you have to like figure out like riddle-ish text and get one of Edgar's best tools there, and then, but it's kind of just miserable. The song's good.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it was hard. I remember it being hard. Maybe I was just under-leveled at this particular point, but I was getting my ass kicked, and I didn't know, like, it was a bad time.
It's like cat girls ending their sentences with "nya." Yeah, I mean, it's a verbal tick. It's just, it turns out they already had a good answer for it, which was making a noise similar to it, and then when it was actualized, it was just like, oh, God.
Or, you know what? If they had an interesting take at all. If it was like, blah, 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 Koopa, Koopa, or I don't know, anything.
Yeah,
other than slowly saying Koopa.
Somebody who seemed like they wanted to be there when they were recording it.
Yeah.
That might have helped. Yeah,
anything.
You can sell anything with a good delivery.
Yeah.
So, that's it for my hot take.
God, what is the name? It's like family. It's a family show where it's like The Office kind of set up where they do the interview with the camera.
Modern Family.
Modern Family. Thank you. We got there, everybody. So now we have bad endings. Although, oh no, we still have time.
Oh, we're good. And Cody said he's running late, so we can run a little late.
Stupid Cody. God, I hate Cody.
So,
hey, look at that.
Hey, I put one that I thought all three of us would agree on at the start of this one because I thought it was the easiest jumping in point to games that just bungled the ending something fierce. And I'm not sure there's a more notorious one in video games than Mass Effect 3.
Then do I have some news for you? But continue.
Sean's wrong. That's what's going to come out of this.
As I say, I don't know what you're going to possibly throw at me because there's only one other series I could think of, which is on my list, that screwed up their ending so badly, and they never quite had the high profile that Mass Effect did. We don't need to talk about this a ton because we talked about this on the show back then. I'm sure, I don't know what the hell episode it is, but it's back there in the archives. You can find it. But the 3-color ending, much maligned as it was, the feeling like everything you did to that point didn't end up mattering, the shunning of some fan theories, which are always dangerous because, if you get yourself really hyped up about a theory of your own, it doesn't happen, you've just set yourself up for disappointment. But the idea of the indoctrination theory and a lot of other ones that could have been panned out in different ways didn't really come to fruition. And then the fact that ultimately they sort of corrected this and sort of revealed its flaws by putting in the DLC where you spent time with the whole group of characters. And that was really well done and what people wanted. The original launch of Mass Effect 3, I think, just has to be where we start on this because those endings were god-awful.
Well, that was going to be a question is, do we count both the DLC, which is not... So they actually did an extended ending as DLC, which fixed some things.
Helped.
And then they did the other thing, which wasn't technically an ending, but yeah, it's kind of like the de facto ending because you get to spend time with everybody. So if we're only counting the original, which I don't think we should because they amended it. I get everybody's problem with it. I'm not saying it's like a great ending. I'm not going to argue that. I fail still to this day to understand why it is so maligned. And maybe it's just because it's not good on such a beloved series that's enough for everybody to just hate it. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think you still get a little bit of separation. I understand not all your choices got to matter, and part of that was they overpromised. Part of it is I don't know what were you expecting kind of too. I don't know.
They overdid it. They overpromised, like you said. You can't have that many branching story paths, and somehow, unless you're writing like Detroit Become Human and have 15 different endings, wholly unique endings, you're going to have problems with that. But I think for me, at least, there's two things that really bugged me the most. It was one, you had this like Reaper off switch, basically. That was something throughout the whole game, this Crucible thing. But it's like the Reapers are, one Reaper in Mass Effect 1 took an entire fleet to take it down. And it was like, man, these guys are unbelievable. Oh man, there's a bunch of Reapers. Oh, don't worry, we'll build this ancient thing where you just have to push a button and they're all gone type of thing. Didn't sit right. And then throughout the entire game, your whole game plan is going through to recruit every species across the galaxy. Hey, we're getting into this one big final battle. And you don't really get to take part in that battle except for running at a giant bright light almost. Like you get to watch
implied,
out the window.
Right?
What's that?
But you don't see it. It's like implied that, they're having a big effect, but...
Yeah, you get to see it out the window while you're sitting in there in the Crucible room. And it's like... But there's this cool battle going on out there that I kind of want to take part in, but no, I'll just watch things blow up. Like
it's sort of like the equivalent of the meme where Squidward's watching through the grate as SpongeBob and Patrick have fun outside.
Exactly.
Not exactly, but kind of, because you have those moments where you're running through this battle, you affect the battle a little bit yourself, you radio communicate with some team members who couldn't be involved in it, depending on the choices you made at that point, because some of them might be dead, but then it all just kind of gets funneled into this one point. It's sort of inevitable. They had to funnel it eventually because, like you said, either you keep branching to the point of oblivion or you have to bring it back sometime. I don't know. Just something about it. I think it's what you originally said, Sean, which is just a beloved franchise, and it made almost everybody unhappy. It wasn't like it made one contingent of them unhappy because then, vocal minority, whatever. Almost everybody came out of that being like, I don't like the choice that I made, and I don't like the other choices either, so what happened?
Well, and then there's I appreciate it with Saren, but the fact that you can make many of the main villains in the series kill themselves was interesting. The whatever face, the elusive man, you can just be like, no, just kill yourself. And he's like you're right.
You're wrong.
Absolutely. I don't know why I've been an antagonist for so long. I'm just done.
That was weird. And Anderson dying, I thought, why do that? It's going to be controversial, clearly. Why then kill a fan favorite character? That's, to me, felt like a little bit of a middle finger. And then I thought, well, maybe I was expecting the game to kind of have facile. Man, my language is terrible tonight. When you're flaccid. Flaccid. Had a kind of a flaccid ending, and I thought it was going to be because they wanted to be able to have the ability to make something canon after. And then it turns out that wasn't even the case, because in one, all the Reapers are destroyed. In another, you blend all organic and machine life.
Yep.
Those are wildly different. But then they didn't really take them anywhere. And one, you become a god. So that clearly wasn't the issue. It just seemed like they needed a little bit more time, which they did take with the extended one, fixed it a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I get it. It is disappointing.
It probably got too much shit, if we're being completely honest, from fans that often can be entitled. And if that was their vision for it, that was the way they got to close the trilogy. That doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. But they had done such a good job of making games that fans liked to that point that it seemed like a shame to stick the landing. And even a death like Anderson, I mean, when you think about, say, Morden, if you didn't save Morden, he went out in a way that everybody's like, oh, that was a super cool ending for him.
Yeah.
And it's memorable. And that's one of the biggest moments of the series for people if that was the direction they took. You can do deaths well. You can do all that well, even for beloved characters. You just got to put in the work for it. Anderson felt like it was kind of we're hurtling towards the finish and we're kicking him out of the airlift. Yeah. Goodbye.
To be fair, I don't think you can. I think Morden is doomed. But there's one where he has a great ending. And I'm pretty sure. I don't know what kind of monster would do this. I think there's one where you kill him.
There is one, and I've watched that, and there is zero way, even if I'm trying to do the most renegade run-through, I could never physically do it.
I know! You can't. It's impossible. You just gotta do the biggest piece of shit in the world if you're gonna kill Morden. That's it.
I watched that, and it hurt.
I'll have to go watch that. I've never actually seen that version of it. I knew it existed, but I've never watched the scene, so I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, so he's doomed no matter what.
I will say two things. One, Doug and Maisie, yes, I agree. Just tonight, Sean's language.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I was going to say, never fear. Doug and Maisie aren't going to miss a chance to dunk on me for my vocabulary.
What we're all thinking. They said exactly what we're all thinking. And
two, they're on Team Dave.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone Team Dave. I gotta say, one part of the ending that I did appreciate was the "fuck you" option to the child in the Crucible part, where you're like, you know what, I'll reject all of your options, and you walk back out, and everyone dies, and it's kind of like, all right, well, you rejected it, and we said this was the only path, and you rejected it, and everyone died, so there was consequence to that.
Can I tell you something sad that you might not be aware of? That was only the extended ending as well. You didn't have that choice in the original ending. So I'm hurting my own argument a little bit, but yeah, I know that was one they programmed in because you did feel railroaded, and you're like, my shepherd, why does he have to do any of these? And it was not a good ending, but at least you had the choice.
Right. I forgot about that was extra added on after the fact because it's been a long time, obviously. It's been almost 10 years now.
Yeah. Hard to believe, huh?
Yeah.
I think more so, actually. I think the game was 2009 or 2010.
The first one was 2009, I think, but the 3 was 2013, I think.
Either way. I'm going to segue into one more real quick before I let you guys get to yours, just because it's very similar, and that is both Deus Ex games of the modern variety, not the original, but Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, because they suffered from a similar problem. The first game, well, okay, again, Human Revolution, I know it's not the first Deus Ex, but that one with Adam Jensen had a branching ending that didn't really have any branches that led to it. It just kind of let you pick different things at the very end of the game. And then they started the second game by sort of rendering all of them meaningless as a way to bring it back together. And then they ended the second game by not concluding the game. Because it was supposed to be like the halfway point. They thought a third game was coming. And guess what? It's been like 6 years and there's not even a game in development as far as we know. So we went from a branching ending with choices that didn't really felt like they did anything to a complete like miss on the ending. The two games themselves, really fun to play. Love the mechanics of leveling up Jensen, the different options of play that they give you between like combat, stealth, whatever. And neither one really stuck the landing whatsoever.
Yeah, so really quick, I want to point out, Dave, I just want to say it's definitely wrong on Mass Effect being 2009. I want to say it's 2007. There's no way it's 2009, though, because I couldn't have played it when I did, if that was the case. Secondly, Chris, I will not dispute really either one. But I will always, I conflate the ending of Mankind Divided because of that awesome sequence where like you have to choose to save, like, I forget, it's like the group of people in one room or like the bomb and
yeah, you have like hostages or a bomb that's going to go off.
But if you're really clever,
you can do both.
You can do both, and it's my favorite thing because they don't, Dave, they never tell you that you can do both.
But here's the problem. That aspect of it is great, but then after that, you just get Eliza Cassan talking. And no conclusion to Adam Jensen's arc whatsoever. Where's Megan? I don't even think she's in the second game. She's name dropped quite a bit because of the organization she works for. What the hell's going on with Janice? Not resolved in any way whatsoever.
The fact that I have no idea what you're talking about right now is, I think, a bad sign for the ending.
It's not great.
I remember the split, and I remember nothing after that.
Yeah, so I mean, that aspect is good, but that's not really the ending. The ending is then all these scenes of like talking head Eliza Cassan telling you what's going on. And it reflects some of the choices you made. But again, no major resolution to the main plot points that are going on the whole game, like the mystery that you're trying to figure out, because they thought another one was coming that may never.
They do that a lot in games. Witcher does it a lot, and it's not as maligned because where it matters, you get some pretty divergent endings, which are great. But they do where like you make choices depending on your path, and they present those choices at the end of each act in like a slideshow of scenes. And a lot of games do that, and I'm split because I'm like, if you can't give it the real attention, maybe don't have the split to begin with. But then I know people like the choice, but then it's not like fully realized. So I guess it's a no-win situation. But more and more games, it feels like are doing that, and I don't love it.
The telltale conundrum.
Yeah, exactly. Certainly.
I'm always torn about that because I thought it was super interesting seeing which percentage of people made certain choices that were the key ones along the way. I also felt like it completely took me out of the experience that I had just had.
Yeah, certainly.
So I was like, you could find those later, and they kept them on a website or something, so you could look if you wanted and be like, oh, let me now that I'm done, especially, let me go see. But
yeah.
I have a couple more to mention, but I've taken up enough time. What do you guys have for this one?
Well, I'll do a couple quick ones. Let's see. So I have a few different lists I have to parse really quick. I would say the sequel. I think I've talked about this on the show before, so I won't spend a lot of time with it. It's the sequel to Shadow of Mordor. It's called like Mordor, Shadow of War, or whatever. The game is fine, but then you get to the ending, and it's like, okay, you've reached like the pseudo ending, but you want the real ending, right? And then you have to go through the epilogue. The epilogue is solely designed to take all your money because it is almost impossible to do without microtransactions. To do it without microtransactions would probably take you an additional 100 hours of gameplay. And a really frustrating thing where, like, I don't like this mechanic in any games, period, where you have to, like, free a certain part of the map and then you go to free another part of the map, but then the first part can get retaken. So then you have to, like, go back and make sure that you're, like, up to date on all of it.
Like the Dynasty Warrior games, kind of. But
yeah, but it's such a slog because everything is high leveled because they want you to buy a bunch of, like, leveling stuff. It is designed only to flip you off as the consumer, and I absolutely hate it. So to me, that qualifies as one of the worst endings to, like, a pretty good game that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then Halo 2. Because
Halo 2's on my list.
Yeah, because I know it's on everybody's list, and, like, I get it. But if you had presented it as Halo 2 Part 1, or, like, some way that made me think I'm going to get I'm going to get what I expect. And if that's just a Part 1, like, that can be okay. But I thought I was getting a full Halo game, and when things really started to feel like they were ramping up, it's like, this is the end. And it wasn't an especially long campaign either. And it's like, you're done. You're going to take the fight to Earth? Yeah, maybe in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I remember playing through Halo 2 and then getting to that ending being like, what the fuck? And then I never played Halo 3. To this day, I've never played Halo 3. And I mean, I never got an Xbox 360 till way, way, way later. So that's probably part of it. But yeah, I never got it.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people were the same. I mean, I'm sure it's not a huge number, but your story is not the only one that ends that way. Somebody turned off by that, and or they didn't want to get the new system. You know, for some people, they were Halo loyalists no matter what, so of course they were going to get the next Xbox. But if that left a sour taste in their mouth, if they weren't ready to get Empire Strikes Back, then maybe that was enough to be like, all right, fine, finish the fight, go fuck yourself.
I would even argue, sure, there's plenty of plot threads, but, like, whether it's a combination of the pacing or the story, like, Empire Strikes Back feels like its own story still.
And it's the end of an arc.
Yeah.
There's a lot left unresolved. I don't know what arc ends at the end of Halo 2.
No, like nothing.
It's just immediately in the middle of something to the point where they just resume right there in 3, and that's what the biggest kick in the teeth is.
You can argue that it is the end of an arc of sorts for the Arbiter.
Yes.
But he's a deuteragonist, so, like, he's only one half of it anyways.
Mm-hmm. And he's only been in the game since the start of this one.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not... We're here for John, damn it. Not.
Yeah.
And I love the Arbiter, but you can't... If you had left, like, Chief's story more closed off, or at least part of it closed off, and left the Arbiters more open-ended, I might have been like, oh, okay, interesting. I don't think you can play that game with Master Chief.
Yeah, and to Selma's point, like, yeah, post-game canon or, like, epilogues, like, Bravely Second is a great example of, like, you can beat it, and it's done, but if you want the full ending, you got to go through, like, some of the hoops. But the hoops are fun, and it's really compelling and interesting. I even think if it's a DLC that you download and it's like an extra chapter, it's just different than the microtransaction nightmare that was Shadow of War. Yeah, it was pay to win. It was bullshit.
And he brings up Trails in the Sky Part 1. To me, Sky is still a complete story. You resolve that entire arc, and it just leaves on a really cruel cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So I get why some people might be like, oh, that's mean to do or whatever. I understand that. But for me, that was impetus to play the second one because I was like, oh, shit, look at this. I got to find out what happens.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, Halo made such an impression on Maisie, she doesn't even remember which one she played. So that's great.
In her defense, I don't think she was born the first time when the first one came out.
Yeah, okay, so. But against her defense, it was like 6 months ago that we played it,
mm-hmm.
And it was Halo 1 because it had an actual ending. And
she probably remembers the Flood. The Flood were cool, and it probably wasn't ODST.
Yeah.
So what's funny is Mass Effect 2 kind of has this similar ending, but it resolves an arc in the same way. Like, they leave you on a cliffhanger, like, hey, more stuff is coming when you see that fleet of Reapers out there at the end of Mass Effect 2.
Of course.
But you feel like, hey, all right, I finished this part of it. We know more is coming, but at least we finished this arc of it.
Not to mention, like, from the day one, and I mean, it was gutsy and maybe presumptuous on their part, it was sold as a trilogy. Mm-hmm. So the big selling point of Mass Effect is we're going to do a trilogy and make sure you take time on decisions because all of them are going to matter, which they ultimately sort of did, but sort of didn't.
Yeah.
Also,
Halo 2, I'm sure you could figure it's going to be a trilogy, but it wasn't like sold as that. You didn't really know what you were in for. And so it was just a kick in the pants when finished the fight. And I'm like, cool, a load screen? It's like, wait, these are credits. Like part 1 credits? Maybe?
Yeah.
No, that's the end of the game. You're done.
Finish the fight after the credits?
After buy a new system.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they're doing a Donkey Kong thing where the credits start to roll, but then the boss isn't. No, it's over.
My examples, I have a couple quicker ones for bad ending examples. My first one I have is Fallout 3.
It's on my list.
The two reasons for that. One, I didn't like all right, well, we're just going to get to this building and everything's fixed if I put this medicine in this thing. It wasn't fun.
You don't like clean endings where it's like it's too easy to wrap things up.
Yeah. There's that aspect of it. And then secondly, the ending you have when you have the Super Mutant Fox as the ending was just such a kick in the teeth of like, hey, I found this loophole where I don't have to die. No. This is your story. You have to go to this. But Fox, you won't die. Like, go in that room, plug this thing in, and walk out, and we'll shake hands and walk away.
I'll tell you what, it can still be my story. We'll have like a side chapter where you went into this thing.
I'll lie. I'll just lie and say I wore a radiation suit. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's annoying. And it's a specific situation. I'm sure other people use other companions. I think he was pretty popular, though. And like you said, it just breaks their own ending. And it's not like they couldn't have had the foresight for it. There weren't that many companions. This wasn't like, you could have had any of 80 characters on your side there. There was like 4. And one of them had the ability to be like, yeah, I'll just go in there and do that for you. We'll continue this story. You did all this work to this point. I got this for you. We'll be best friends forever. No, you're going to go in there and you're going to fucking die. You're going to get radiated to death.
I have to think someone realized it. It was way too late. And they
Maybe.
were like, oh, God, what have we done? Because they clearly acknowledged it because of the dialogue. Like, he knows what to say. And, yeah, I think that was just at the 11th hour. They're like, oh, wait. This is a massive plot hole.
I can imagine some tester going through the game and be like, hey guys, I know this game's 99% finished, but have you considered...
Yeah, I just imagine the process of them going through like testing all the side quests and making sure everything in the whole world fit together nicely and there wasn't as many bugs. They failed because there's always bugs in those. But point is, like, they went and did all this testing and someone was like, hey, did we check the flags on the final event of the mains campaign just to see like what that looks like again? And everyone's like, oh God. And like you said, last minute, they just throw some line of dialogue in there. Like, get Fox's actor back in here. We're going to record 2 lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just absolute panic and bedlam.
Exactly. So we shared what we think about bad endings and about endings that are like pay to win. What about a game where there is no ending? And
so Halo 2, but worse.
Yeah, I mean, Halo 2 is an ending. It's just whatever.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Metal Gear Solid 5.
Mm-hmm. I thought that might come up from you.
Out and out masterpiece, except that the Kojima kept being like, but the game's not done yet. Like, we got to add all this stuff. And like, and to be fair, it's people are still discovering new things you can do in that game. It's crazy creative. But eventually Konami is just like, look, we're shipping, like the line in the sand. It's done. We're sending it out. You've done. It was super delayed. That's why they sent it in 2 parts. But the last mission, you can read about it. It was never designed. There's, for all intents and purposes, there's kind of an ending, but so many threads were left unresolved, and they were all addressed in this actual final mission that never got released. And so it's hard for me because I want to give it like a 10, but like, how can I give a masterpiece to a game that's not finished?
I feel like, how do you not release that as DLC or another game almost?
Well, because they got a divorce. Because I think of Metal Gear Solid 5 and then Nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's hard because as a creator, you want to see your vision, but I also kind of sympathize with the publisher of like, you said this is going to be done 4 years ago.
Yeah, like
we're still adding
we have
stuff.
stakeholders to please. Like, we have certain sales targets to meet. We can't just keep punting this forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I get that perspective too. That's one where I've only heard about it. I've never played Metal Gear Solid, any of them, believe it or not. But that was one I thought might come up from you.
I have one other example, and it's merely to piss Sean off.
The Witcher 3.
I would kill you.
Mine is BioShock Infinite, and it's not because of the ending is very creative with the character movement. The gameplay in the ending I thought sucked. The whole game just falls into this, all right, go shoot a bunch of guys. I wasn't a fan of how the gameplay was. The ending was unique and interesting in how the characters developed, and the story was interesting. The gameplay I thought was really bad in the end.
Okay, interesting. That's fine. Look, the story of the ending is amazing. We're talking Infinite, right? Because you can make a case for BioShock 1 also not have a very good ending. Here's an interesting thing about video games, I think, as a whole, Dave. You specifically, I think, more than most, feel it when the ending gets too gamey, where they feel like they have to force in a boss fight. Mass Effect 2 is a great example of that, where Arkham Asylum is another one. I didn't have the same problems that everybody did, but I certainly can understand them. Like the Joker, he's this intellectual enemy. Oh, but he's going to get roided out just because it's a video game.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's that giant bird at the end of Mass Effect, it's BioShock Infinite, where it's just like, man, we're going through this game, and yeah, there's some weird characters and things you have to fight, and all of a sudden, okay, it's just all-out war. Okay, this was not as fun because I'm just all-out war. I like stories more than gameplay, and so when you throw me into I just got to shoot a bunch of times, when that's not the game I signed up for, it's not as fun.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, even there's a few different games sort of akin to a Deus Ex where it's like you have this entire game of go through this facility however you want, sneak through, use tech approach, just go guns a-blazing, whatever, right? And then at the end, it's like pour bullets into a thing, and you're like, but I didn't play the whole game this way, right?
Yep.
I get that. Soma in chat brings up Xenogears. That's another one that just dropped off the face of the earth without a true ending, a la MGS5. I wanted to bring up Borderlands.
Yeah, where it was like, hey, all that you did, pointless.
Let's tease this vault the entire game. What's in the vault?
Yeah.
Not much. Don't worry about it. But you were the one hyping it up the whole game. What do you mean don't worry about it?
Yeah. Well, and then you have an element of games where I think someone maybe talked about this, and if they didn't, then it triggered this idea anyways. So you can take credit either way. Where there's a twist that comes out of like the 11th hour. And as much as I love 9, there's a bit of an example here where you have Kuja is the boss the whole game. And then it's Garland, and that's fine too. And then the last thing is like an entity of like a god that you're fighting, and who has never shown up, is not mentioned at all, and that's the final boss. And you're like, what? Where did this come from? And I feel like games do that a lot too. They're like, what if it's a bigger thing that comes out of nowhere? And like, you're not alone in trying that. I see it a lot. I just don't understand it.
Like all the personas.
Twilight Princess has that too. Where you're fighting Zant. It's like, just kidding. Here's Ganon.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Zant, 2/3 of the way. See ya.
Yeah.
Didn't do well with test audiences. We had to bring Ganon in somewhere. We panicked. We made an 11th hour decision. Sorry.
Yeah. Guys, how do we... So, the chat has taken on a life of its own. How do we feel... I think it's interesting. They're just talking to each other now. They're not even like talking
That's
to
fine.
us.
That's what happens on these type of things. We'll just pick and choose.
I feel like it's like a threesome that like I'm in, but then I'm like Ross. I get kicked out of the threesome.
That's fine. You have to do a better job of holding their attention in the threesome if you want to keep them. If not, then let them do their own thing.
I'm glad you weren't too mean to me for doing a Friends reference.
No.
Especially Dave.
I'm apathetic to Friends these days.
Okay, that's nice.
Rachel and Ross can go fuck themselves.
Pretty much.
Doesn't sound like apathetic.
I put it in dishonorable mention because I wanted to put this image on the screen. We're not going to really have a section where we talk about bad games with bad endings. We're going to do like great endings and great beginnings in a future episode.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring in Heavy Rain because pretty much every ending of Heavy Rain is bad one way or another, whether it's just discordant with the things you did choose along the way or just outright terrible writing to begin with. This one, in particular, the one on the screen with him hanging himself in prison, not especially great. The one where Madison offers to have his children to replace the ones who died, and then he kills himself, especially not great. Most of the endings where characters die in general, like the other ones besides Ethan, not great. So, look, we've gone in on David Cage before. Conceptually, I mean, I enjoyed my time with Heavy Rain, but not because it was a masterpiece of writing, just because it was interesting and different. Succeeded in some ways, and then he got up his own ass and just fell apart by the end.
It's the most depressing thing for me because I love those types of games. We've obviously talked about this before because I think they're unique and intriguing. And then you get endings like that where you just overthink yourself almost. Put a baby in me because I want to be happy with you. It's like, that's not how people talk.
I can't believe that's real still.
And Madison's supposed to be this like smart, savvy journalist. David Cage can't write women for shit. It's his biggest weakness by far. So that gets this in the end where it's just like, hey, I've known you for like 4 days and I know exactly all the trauma you went through. You want to like fuck just to replace the void in your heart from your dead sons? What? And it's supposed to be a bad ending, but it's not bad in the sense of like morality. It's bad in the sense of it's trash.
Yeah.
And yes, I see all the shut
John!
in the chat, and that's great. If you haven't seen those videos, you have to, especially the ones where it gets further away and you can hear it very quietly in the background. I
would say Grand Theft Auto 4 is a pretty dishonorable mention.
It's not very good. I didn't make my list because I think it's a good game, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's like it's a conceit that you have to have for these, because I'm sure like the Link Faces of Gamelon or whatever game, Wand of Gamelon Faces of Evil. I'm sure those were bad endings as well as just horrible games all the way through. But it's more interesting when it's a bad ending on a game that is at least okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to put one in here that I didn't get a chance to mention, and I don't think it sucked from beginning to end, but it had a bad beginning and a bad ending, and that's Coder 2, Knights of the Old Republic 2. Bad beginning, boring, running around not knowing what the hell you're doing, and then bad ending because they rushed it for Christmas.
I remember that ending being like, wait, what just happened to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I don't remember a lot of that game, and I remember, I'll believe you, Dave, if the beginning was not good. I specifically remember the end of like, cool? What's going on?
I remember getting to the end and they, spoiler alert for a 20-year-old game, but one of your companions that was with you the whole game turns out to be the bad guy. It was kind of cool in that sense, but then you end up, the main villain was essentially her lightsabers that you had to beat. And you're like, why am I trying to kill your lightsaber? This feels weird. Why is this a selectable enemy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then again, at the end of Knights of the Old Republic 1, I love sometimes gameplay affects like the story itself, like moments that are unscripted that just happen when you're playing the game can sometimes be the coolest thing. Knights of the Old Republic 1 was the opposite, because I was never very good at that game. It was one of the first type what do you call that, where it's an RPG but like it's always moving, like you're not inputting everything.
Active RPG, I think.
Whatever the name is. It was the first one I ever played. So the ending of Knights of the Old Republic 1 devolved into me as the R2-D2 unit running away from like Darth whatever. And he's chasing me. And every like 10 seconds I can drop a mine. And I just like absolutely attrition, whittle down his health. And if you were expecting an epic fight, that's not what happened.
Well, I love the idea of you bumbling your way through it the whole time when you think you're the good guy, and then you turn into the bad guy, and then everyone around him becomes the bumbling idiots instead, and they can't really handle it. I guess it sort of fits the story.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Like R2 just lost his circuits. Yeah. It's over.
And now that he's not an amnesiac anymore, Darth Revan has got his full capacity, so he's coming at you with everything he's got.
Yeah.
My last one is, this is going to be more of an obscure pull, but I think it was one of the worst things I've ever seen. Army of Two, The 40th Day. There's an obscure pull from a series that most people probably haven't played, but essentially the whole thing is built on co-op, hence the name Army of Two. The whole second game was not especially great, but as a guy who just enjoys co-op games, Lincoln and I gave it an honest try. The ending is basically, how do I describe this just off of memory? You are on a plane with a terrorist. The terrorist has a detonator he says is going to blow up like a major city if one of you doesn't shoot the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Now that sounds kind of interesting. You've built this teamwork over 2 games of the same characters, and you've relied on each other, had each other's backs in-game and out, so conceptually it sounds neat. If one shoots the other, doesn't matter who shoots who, there is a really bad scene where they immediately regret it, and then the guy pulls on them anyways, so you shoot him to death, and nothing happens with the kill switch that he has. It's a fake. If you don't choose to kill each other, then you still end up killing the bad guy, and you don't really find out if the bomb was a fake or not until the very end when it was. So you get put in this situation that sounds cool, but then all the choices you make at the end either involve betraying the guy you've been helping for years in story for no real reason, because you can't prove he has a detonator switch for real, or ignoring the choice and then getting to the ending anyways. And by the way, the one where you shoot your own partner is presented as the positive morality choice.
Yeah. Let me guess. Lincoln did not hesitate to shoot you.
I don't remember. Okay. I do seem to remember. This might have been towards the end of the first game. There was a time where we just kept killing each other. I don't think it was this moment, though, because this was a story-based one. But like we turned on each other and then it's like diving behind cover and like just making it a lot more involved than it had to be. That was at least a good memory of the game. This ending was just like, okay. And by the way, if you don't shoot the terrorist, then he ends up being the narrator for the ending. And you're just like, what are we doing? What's happening? Why are you getting this time?
Was it? But that was the game where like the whole game is a series of like you have choices like that.
Yeah.
But like they're always bad. Like if you don't do something, they like slip on a banana peel and like it still is a bad outcome.
Correct.
Like I remember Lincoln telling me about.
It's like the morality of the decisions you make, but the end result is they still die. And one of them is like you're looking through a wall, and then it's the guy has a picture of like kids, and he's a family guy, but he dies anyways in a horrible off-screen death, and you're just like, okay, I don't know what I was supposed to take away from this, but sure.
So did you like that Splinter Cell did that too? Where they're like, okay, you've done missions together. Now you're on opposite sides. They'll kill each other.
Maybe that was the one where we killed each other and it was an army of two.
Okay.
Because I remember that being more extended. And somehow we kept like failing it or something. Maybe we weren't doing it quick enough, or we kept like combat rolling around the airplane because we didn't want to kill each other. We're like, you can't make us do this. We'll see if we can extend it long enough to matter. And we couldn't.
No.
That was probably Splinter Cell and not Army of Two. So I don't remember anything positive about Army of Two or its sequel. The end.
Great.
I put a final thoughts on here because I wanted a fourth thing, and I don't have a final thought. I put this on here because I thought I would mention like good games that stuck the landing, but we're going to do that in a future episode. Spoiler alert, this is going to be on there.
Final thoughts is nice as like a backup, but we ended up taking all the time anyway.
Yeah.
So
one final just laugh that the three of us will get and the chat might not, but game with bad beginning is NBA 2K16 freaking and vibing.
Well, yeah, I mean the whole thing is bad, but you're absolutely right. It's like, oh, this is the Spike Lee joint.
Just trust us when I say just go watch the ending of that. I don't even think it's too much of a spoiler just to say like go look for Vic's funeral and watch that like 2.5 minute scene and just see how thoroughly on the nose it is.
How someone like Spike Lee, who I like a lot, can be associated with something like that, and he seemed to enjoy it a lot. Like he seemed to have fun. I just, it's beyond understanding for me.
He's known for, you can make interesting characters, you can make people who you want to root for and actually see both sides of it, and then he creates Vic, the most one-sided horrible character. Like there is no redeeming quality in this person.
I don't even like Freak. I don't like anyone in that. I mean, you're absolutely right.
And then you go play the game, and you're like, all right, well, now it's time for some basketball.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go get my rookie contract. I guess my best friend's dead, but, I've forgotten about that.
Shit, so,
we're not going to worry about that anymore. Look, I mean, they tried an experiment. It failed miserably, but you have to at least give them credit for trying.
It felt like he was trying to go make like a Breaking Bad, like a Better Call Saul, and just like absolutely failed at every level, at every turn.
I would love to be a fly on the wall when these decisions were made and everybody in the room at the time was like, oh, yeah, that's the one. And you look back and you're like, oh, my God.
To be fair, we don't know Spike Lee. It could have been like, oh, you guys, the script is going to ruin my career. I can't do this. Like, we have you on contract.
Yeah, but this game has to drop on this release date. You signed the deal. Shut up, Kojima.
Yeah, maybe we should be fair to Spike Lee.
All right, well.
My final thought is don't get me wrong. I love anything our chat does. I love it. I love the fact that we have a chat. So thank you everyone for tuning in. It makes it so much more fun for us. And we also hope it's fun for you.
The start of Final Fantasy VI sucks. There, I said it again.
Oh my God.
Man,
oh my God.
it's hard, isn't he?
Let's fight to the death. Let's fucking fight right now. It doesn't actually suck. I just find it very bland compared to the rest of the game after that. That's all, honestly. It isn't terrible. There are good moments for sure. But I loathe the idea of going back to it. I used to keep a save state right after the party reunited. So
you are going to, like, I was going to say Chrono Trigger had one of the better beginnings, and now you're making me regret that. Because
you can lash out in hatred if you want,
yeah,
but you don't have to spite a game.
I'm going to do this for Chris, and then Chris comes and personally is attacking me.
But the difference is, I believe that the start of Final Fantasy VI is boring, and you don't think that about Chrono Trigger.
I would be lying just to spite.
Yeah, I know. So it's not going to hurt me because that's still my number one game of all time. It hasn't budged in the last 6 years. So.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, thanks to everybody in the chat. Yeah, parting shot. That's just the beauty of this because I get to decide when the show ends, so I get to just throw little jabs right before I leave, just a little jab into the chest. All right, that's the end of the episode. You can see when the next one is. That'll be the last one at this time slot for anybody not in Arizona. We'll talk about that next week. But daylight savings time is coming, which affects everybody but us, which means the start will change.
It affects you.
We'll get to it. It's really not that hard. It'd be a lot simpler if everybody just stopped doing fucking daylight savings time. But hey, a few states have it right. So anyways, we'll see you next time in between shows. You can find us at objectionnetwork.com or youtube.com/objectionnetwork. And that's all I got. Goodbye forever.